But the subsequent album that would follow in the wake of, bits of backlash, bits of people getting upset, whatever, bits of drama, bits of sides being drawn, bits of interpreting a title released like that the way people interpreted it, the subsequent album would be released on June the 17th of 2016 with a move from Southern Lord to Nuclear Blast, which is pretty much the closest thing that we have had in to a major in metal, certainly in the from the 2010s onwards. And at this point, Nails' notoriety is so much so that You Will Never Be One of Us and its move to a bigger label was always going to be one of the biggest heavy releases of 2016. I remember Abandon All Life was, felt really buzzy at the time. And again, places outside of metal journalism began to really talk about Nails being a boundary pushing band. But You Will Never Be One of Us felt like an explosion in a different kind of way. Nails actually felt like a big band somehow, bizarrely, when this record came out. The Guardian and Rolling Stone were now in on covering Nails, calling them the harshest band in America and the new angriest band in hardcore, deceptively. Nails fever is at its mainstream peak when this album is released, and the press cycle surrounding it. Decibel magazine's Nails cover simply reads, "Have they made the album of the year?" with an accompanying 10 out of 10 review inside. 8 years on, with this being the latest long-form Nail statement that we have, was the hype deserved?
I mean, short answer, yes. Like, you're going to say that I like every Nails album, but I mean, I think You Will Never Be One of Us is an album that, again, taking a bit of time away from it and going back to it now. I hadn't listened to this album for a good while, and then when we got the announcement of the reunion a couple of months ago, I put this on and hit play, and I was immediately just been like, "Oh my fucking god, this album is spectacular."
I'm still blown away by this record, and I look back at this little arc of this 3-album curve of Nails, and I think it might be the most exciting 3-album curve released in my time being a rock and metal fan, because every possible hurdle that was set in front of them with each subsequent record, they just leapt over it. Because Unsilent Death comes out, and then I remember the kind of preview magazines in 2013, it would be listed, Abandon All Life, speculatively would be listed next to the new Alice in Chains record, or the new, Dillinger, or whoever. And then it completely warranted all that when it came out, it was even more harsh and more extreme. And then in 2016, they're being talked about on the level of, Gojira releasing new records around this time, all of that sort of thing. They kind of established themselves as mainstays, almost like a legendary band in extreme metal in record time. And then the record comes out, and it's unbelievable. Like, the fact that in this 3-album curve, in a genre with as fickle and picky a fan base, like the crossover extreme metal and hardcore, and you don't meet people who go, yeah, but they fell off on the 3rd record.
I mean, I've actually seen people saying that.
I've seen people call this, I've seen people call this their sellout record, all kinds of nonsense statements. And again, that those are people I'm like, you're a poser if you're saying that this is a sellout record, or trying to downplay how fucking good this record is. You are trying to be some sneer. You're the kind of person that people think Nails are. If you're sneering at an album that is as good as You'll Never Be One of Us.
If you asked me if Nails have a 10 out of 10 Hall of Fame album, I would have to ponder that statement and think about it seriously for a moment. Probably. But this is the one. This is the one that I would be considering. This is the album that, after 2 unbelievably intense, proper landmark in themselves records, upping the ante of how hostile this kind of music could be, I think basically perfects everything about it to that Hall of Fame level. There's not a song on it that is remotely disposable. And the self-critiquing that we spoke about that led to Abandon All Life from Unsilent Death, it led to stronger performances, more dynamic songs, a sound that was less recognisable as just crust punk and more like its own strange, unique killing machine on the confluence of all of these things. That happens again with this, because around this album, what Unsilent Death have that Abandon All Life didn't so much is it had those anthems. Abandon All Life went so unbelievably extreme that it doesn't have those Unsilent Death, Suffering Soul moments. Even though it feels like it's obviously such a Hall of Fame record for its own reasons. Like we said, if someone was going to pick Abandon All Life as the best Nails record, I think I would know why they're saying that. I also think if someone says it's their least preferred of the 3 Nails records, I know why they're saying that, and that's sort of the main reason. And even though they've made this insane record that by its own merits and what it strives to do is basically perfect for what it's trying to achieve, Nails recognise that. And, Todd, I've got a quote where he says, Abandon All Life, this shit's really aggressive, but it's not really hook-orientated. You feel like you've gotten beaten up, but you don't remember much of the beating. Let's take the extremity of Abandon All Life and the catchiness and thickness of Unsilent Death, and let's combine them both for You Will Never Be One of Us, and in my opinion, we accomplished it. I still think Abandon All Life works out to be the most, if you just want to show someone how absurdly intense Nails can be, you show them that one. But as an album experience, which is the thing that we were talking about, Nails really finely tuning and crafting, even if it is only 15-minute packages, it feels deliberate here to a degree it never had been before. This record feels calculated to me, which almost feels like it should be the antithesis of what Nails is, right? Like, 'cause Nails is raw, blunt, unfiltered, rage and aggression, and if you think about it too hard, it might stumble. But Nails found a way to not dilute the rage and make this record a calculated killer. Like, it is a fucking assassin of a record. It is seething, and it knows exactly where it needs to place its strikes to excise that. And without that level of attention to detail in the construction, that is when bands just make those, sloppy punk 7 inches forever. There are loads of bands who never diluted the rage by never really thinking about what they were doing and never made something like this. But You Will Never Be One of Us feels like a record that not just any band could actually make.
That statement of wanting to find that meeting point between Unsilent Death and My Life, that is, to me, what You Never Be One of Us is, because it is as scathing and hate-fueled and violent and volatile as Abandon Life. But this is an album that has legitimate, again, just modern metal hits that I'm you want to talk floor fillers, there are tons of them on this album. Again, we will get onto the title track, I'm sure. But if you want just anthemic, power violence, grindcore, songs, this is the album that has them, isn't it?
I always think of this as almost like The Bleeding, where Cannibal got heavier and more guttural and nastier and more graphic with each record. And on the 4th one, it was like, well, where can we go where no one else can? Well, we could write the catchiest death metal riffs ever. And this isn't the most extreme Nails record. It's not the most raw or frantic or anything like that. But it's laser focused. It's like a specific point in your head, and it's just going to pierce a spike through it that you'll never be able to get out. And everything about this record, from the title to the cover to the music therein, again, it's like it's been architecturally designed to be as powerful and overwhelming an artistic statement as possible.
Yeah, and again, that's an interesting comparison point to what we were saying about Abandon All Life and how that record just feels like just being flayed in some fucking subterranean dungeon. And this is so much more, you're right, sort of laser precision about it. It's fascinating how, while essentially just being Nails the whole way, the 3 albums have those quite distinctive kind of sensations of how they sort of just hit you with that maximum aggression. 10 songs, 21 minutes and 43 seconds. We've gotten there. It's the monolith by those standards. The Nails album structure reaches its most extreme conclusion here with They Come Crawling Back taking up more than a third of the album's 21-minute, 43-second runtime. The subtle evolution from Nails' beginnings, I think here, like we said, Unsilent Death, very clearly, to our ears, a punk album. This is where they have definitely, I think, grown more into the metal than at least they were earlier in the punk. Evidence in point is that Nails are finally accepted into the Encyclopedia Metallum on the basis of You Will Never Be One of Us, who will often induct bands when they make records that reach a certain quota of metal to not metal, I suppose. Nails apparently weren't there before, but they got there with this one. It features artwork from Rest from the band Leviathan, who is someone who I know that, people will have problems with kind of certain degrees of his involvement or whatever. But I really love the artwork for this, and it's very. He has a very distinct art style, but it also feels very distinct to the Nails sort of vision in terms of like. It actually sums up the title, you know, like it has the one kind of black sheep. It's like a really necro version of something like the Minor Threat Outer Step cover. You know, it's like there's the one animal going against the kind of herd of what is there, and they're all just snarling and fucking evil. It's awesome, isn't it?
They're like trying to drag the thing down into them, and it's just this like devil like beast creature fighting back against the oncoming horde.
It's so Mel. Like this like black devil looking guy, white smoke coming out of his eyes, mouth,
tentacles.
Chest, head.
He looks like he doesn't give a fuck as well, does he? He's like, yeah, I'm going against the grain.
Yeah, and
fucking touch me.
and, like, unlike the Minor Threat cover, where it's like you have the black sheep that's sort of out of step, and then the herd. Like in this case, you really don't want to be part of the herd because there are all these distorted, warped leper faces. It's like it's such a great like way of presenting. Like the sort of ethos of the album title, it's so metal. Like you could put a Nocturnus logo on it, and it would work well.
Yeah.
It's just like, again, it's a perfectly struck balance between the two worlds.
Yeah, and it really feels like, again, if the analogy, I suppose, is like, let's say the thing in the middle is Todd Jones, and the things swarming in from the round side are fucking pitchfork journalists trying to get, like, you know, their scoop, and he's like, no, I won't touch you, I don't give a shit. It's kind of, it's brilliantly definitive in that sense. But again, that's another metal reference point, and Todd Jones has said, you know, this album and its kind of exact balance of punk and metal is kind of the sound for Nails that he was always striving for in his head, and they really got there with this one. He also finds his voice on it with that kind of really high voice-cracking bark that was on those earlier albums. Actually, it's quite a noticeable vocal shift, isn't it? Like, it turns into more of a snarl and a growl on this album. And the metal elements that were there more prominently in Abandon All Life, the way they really started to integrate, like, fucking pick scrapes, increase of the double bass drumming and those rolling rhythms, stuff like that, all over this record. And it makes this record sound like an engine. It's fucking crazy how much they improved those elements. And Kurt Ballou, this time, I want to say, like, the whole HM2 Entombed Core thing that was bubbling up when they were making Unsilent Death, and then by the time of Abandon All Life, everybody, you know, knows exactly what you mean by that, you know? Darker Handcraft Fever and all of that has happened at that point. By 2016, that is not, like, the new or dominant trend anymore. Like, a year either side of You Will Never Be One of Us, both Black Breath and Trap Them put out their final records, and neither of those are kind of like given the full thorning press treatment the way some of their earlier ones had been. So the Kurt Ballou HM2 core thing was very well established, and for many people almost played out. And yet, is You Will Never Be One of Us the craziest Kurt Ballou production job of his career?
I mean, it's got to be like the most iconic in a way, isn't it? Of just like taking that sound and just like crystallizing it to perfection.
It's so thick. The other records, like Unsilent Death, like we say, it's bruising, it's cold and all that. Abandon All Life is like white hot. This is just like a thick-necked, like anaconda of a record. It's just like when it comes in, like, I can barely pick out what the moving parts are doing, which doesn't sound like a wild thing on a grindcore record, but it's so cacophonous.
It's almost like fucking when you hear Far Beyond Driven or something, and you go, wow, you have made that kind of like style of metal that you were pioneering, you know, you have made it sound as fucking fat as it could ever be, right? This record sounds insane. And again, differently to Abandon All Life, it's less of that fires of hell raging all around you. The precision of it, while being that explosive. The snare sound on this, which Kurt Ballou actually, like, had the snare for this album, like, handmade for Taylor Young for this record, this titanium shell snare. And my God, the thickness of it. It's like a volcanic eruption every time he hits that fucking thing.
I feel like I could listen to the drum tracks in isolation and get a comparable amount of pleasure. Again, it's got like a wild amount of fidelity for a Nails record, where it's like you can pick out what's going on, and yet it never feels remotely dialed down or softened, or it doesn't feel like a Devon Townsend production job where it's really clinical and precise. It's still, like you say, explosive, and yet all the moving parts kind of come into vision pretty quickly.
It's like blockbuster in comparison to where Nails have been in terms of like the sound and the production of it. It is, but it does that without, again, sacrificing anything that you come to Nails for. It's just, and Nails shouldn't sound this like precise and like not polished, but like just high fidelity and incredible sounding, and but also sound like it is the most violent, volatile thing imaginable. It's like the two things shouldn't mix together, but they find that, like Kurt Blue and Nails just together, they find that line to walk where they are perfectly balancing all those elements.
Yes. And the title track that we alluded to in terms of just a song coming out that put the name of the album out there, and that ruffled feathers, and that inspired think pieces as we've just gone over in the earlier part of the special, and so on. But we didn't talk about the actual sound of that song. And when that song was released, I wasn't getting up in arms about a particularly exclusionary album title or anything like that. I was losing my fucking goddamn mind because the song You Will Never Be One of Us by Nails had been released into the world.
I was like, I saw them in films, but then the moment I hit play and you get that initial blast, I was like, okay, cool. And then the moment I stopped caring about any of that bullshit drama was the moment You will never be one of us. And I was like, that's it, cool. None of that fucking matters, because they've just dropped that change into that second half of the song with that riff hitting and the chorus, and it is just like, you can take all of your gatekeeping, all that. This is just an all-timer metal banger that it's all I want to listen to. Like, nothing else mattered at that point, because I had this track and I was like, yeah, I don't care about any of the drama.
Even if, like, I was more sympathetic to, the whole, it's scene bullying, it's gatekeeping, it's elitism, that whole view. The best argument against it is Todd Jones barking "You will never be one of us" into that riff.
Yeah, it warrants itself, doesn't it? It justifies itself.
Who wants to listen to, like, who wants to read Metal Sucks' article after you've read that? It's like, no, I'm just listening to that again. Like,
yeah, literally.
As far as, like, we've praised the Nails openers so far, this is the best one. Like, it might be, like, the defining song of the band. And everything like that, slow bleeding, like those voices repeating the mantra, and then when it arrives, like, that thing we were saying about I wouldn't call this like it's too long to be a micro song, but for ostensibly a power violence song, it's all hooks. There's no part of it that isn't catchy.
Yeah, and I mean, again, the intro, you can actually, like, you can see on Spotify, if you've got the lyrics feature, it comes up with, like, weirdly, it's like John Baisley, Jake Bannon, they're all in there. And then that little rousing intro makes that smack of those snares and double basses for the first time hitting your ears. 35 seconds to start. Again, I talk a lot about kind of breaking down the structure of Nails songs, because I think it's important to really recognise what is going on with them. 35 seconds that opens up the song, more than 15 seconds of which are the feedback squalling and the guest spoken word intro. Then insane blow your head off with a shotgun intro blast and crazy kind of grindcore blast riff when the vocals come in. Both of those are inside another 20 seconds or so. That is the fast part of the song done by that point. The fast part of this song, essentially, if you cut off the intro, lasts for 20 seconds or so. And it sounds mental when you put it down on paper like that, because you're all thinking about it. You're all thinking about how memorable it is. It's such a defining part of the track and where the riff transitions go. It doesn't feel like they could have fit it into that amount of time. But they have. And the all-out grindcore speed part of that title track is just over, like that. And then the last minute of the song is the part that Sam was alluding to, which, in terms of that Nails trick, which was going from their very first 12-inch of go, 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 stop, mid-pace mosh riff to end a song, this is the biggest nugget of gold imaginable. The way they execute on this one is a little bit of a newer thing, because it's not a D beat and it's not a slow breakdown wide open wound style mosh part either. What it is it's a metallic double bass chug steamroller. The things that they are, learning from Sepultura and Slayer and the metal bands of that ilk, the way they just tighten that fist and let it go, the way they chug that riff out 4 times over to start with, right? Just before everything else comes in, let the anticipation grow for those 6 seconds, and on the last one of those riff cycles, shout, "You will never be one of us." I know I'm going on about the structure here, but just look at the fucking magic that they have teased out over those 45 seconds or whatever it is to begin with, and it just makes for fucking carnage when they can pay off on that rapid pace to start with.
It is the payoff. It's like we were talking about, those like Mike songs, those furious grinding blasts that are like on Abandoned Life never really had that release, that like payoff. This is that release valve just going, and you are being rewarded with just one like I say, the greatest kind of like chugging headbanger riffs. Like again, that was one like again, particularly like Abandoned Life. There's not really many like you'd say are like just headbanger like kind of like fast paced riffs or anything like that. And the You and Every One of Us riff is just that. You want to just bang your head so hard, like you're gonna just like headbutt the wall in front of you and knock it down. And it is just combined with like that You and Every One of Us hook, and then also the whole like no truth, no trust, you will never be one of us like chorus hook and all that. Like it's just this perfect like just encapsulation of like, here is the reward you've been waiting for, of just like an untouchable legendary hook.
That riff is unforgettable. That snare is pumping like a shotgun. It's one of those moments of just like awe-inspiring violence in heavy music. It's just a simple riff built and paid off with maximum precision for maximum results.
It kind of reminded me, thinking about it now, it reminds me of like less than a year later when Executioner's Tax came out, and it was just there was just this aura around it. We are, who could walk past that at a festival and not want to stop and check it out, no matter what kind of metal fan you are, of what age, of whatever demographic, whatever that is. For a few seconds, Nails have that quality. For maybe the only time I wouldn't say they've ever had it, because there are moments where if you are attuned to that sort of thing, you'd be interested.
Yeah, I think like Unsilent Death, the title track, which you went on about a lot earlier, is like an all-time fucking hit banger for that kind of like hard, crusty, death metal influenced hardcore, right? What you're saying with something like Executioner's Tax is You and Every One of Us is just it's like one of the definitive heavy tracks of the decade.
Yeah.
Any type.
Yeah. Exactly. And but Executioner's Tax is recognisable as a song to anyone. Whereas if you weren't au fait with what grindcore and power violence was, and you showed someone You Will Never Be One of Us, it would take their head off. And yet it's so catchy.
Yeah, and I think what we were talking about, the precision of how the record is laid down, how it is, recorded and produced, and how those frequencies hit your ear, they've managed to make those things just cut to the target in the most direct way, an undeniable way they ever had been. And for everything that song was trying to be, truthfully, with the kind of the venom aimed at the targets, the sycophants, the people co-opting the banner of alternative culture for money or attention or whatever, which in turn does make it a really empowering, righteous thing to be in on. Shouting that shit back, the us in the title is you, right? All of us here, it's us if you're not a fucking dick. It is one of the most, it's one of the best moments of music in this decade, that just last fucking go moment. I said in the Abandon All Life chat that Tyrant kind of represents the best of like the micro sub 1 minute Nails songs. I think that's certainly true for the earlier era of Nails, but the way they approach this album, really like coldly and sternly looking to elevate all they do, Friend to All is essentially Tyrant again, because the opening riff is extremely similar, right? Like you could almost get them mixed up, like there's a very similar sort of picking thing there. It's almost exactly the same length. It has a similar structure with the back end moving into kind of the tom heavy, kind of groovier part. But Friend to All feels like it has taken the wild lashing out of Tyrant and just like honed it to a fucking bullet point.
It's that. I mean, I think it's insane that Friend to All is 45 seconds long, because like again, like the amount of song that song's doing, that opening sort of like thrashing, frantic first 20 seconds, but when you get that bass line and that like tom bit, and it's just like again, this is rocking at that point. Like
the second half riff is so catchy.
That's it. It's so infectious and fun, and and at the same time just being violent and intense. And I'm like, how are you doing this in 45 seconds when it feels like you've covered so much ground in that time and you've got so many memorable instrumental bits and hooks and all that? Like, it is, to me, that is like the definitive like sub 1 minute Nail song to me.
Yeah, where the cymbal chokes land, where the blast beats begin and stop, where the music will drop out for the "you're not my fucking friend" at all. Like, it's almost surgical. They've taken the micro song and turned it into that precision strike.
And one of the most fun Nail songs to sing along to, like Social Climbing Cocksucker, Five Faced Motherfucker, You Don't Fucking Stand for Shit, Die. Like, Todd, we have
Such a
company.
way with words.
Like, it's unspeakably fucking furious. And again, but the intonation of it's not just a blur. Like a lot of grindcore songs, like even ones I like, you read the lyrics and go, when did he say that? Like,
Yeah.
there's no way. But like this, you have them in front of you. You can like bark. It's like the Tom Araya thing. Like you can pick it out as soon as you can see it in front of you.
Absolutely. And what you just said, Sam, about kind of it's mad that Friend to All is like, you know, one of the micro songs. It's 45 seconds long. I think really, like, Made to Make You Fail is sub 1 minute as well. But I forget that because how much song they are getting into these songs is fucking wild. That's not like a blink and you'll miss it moment. That's a, oh my god, I am registering every second of this.
Such a mighty chug on that song, on that riff.
Oh,
like, on
that
intro.
riff. How are you going to open with that? It's fucking unbelievable.
Rumble on that engine that is just like charging up that song. And then when it just bursts out into that, like, again, those like Kerry King, Slayer solos. And
raging.
Rages so hard. It's fucking perfect. Like,
everything about this album feels designed to cut through the mix beautifully. Like it's a miracle. I know we're saying it a lot, but it's a miracle of mixing this album. I really think it needs to be recognised as that. Like, to have it sound as clear and precise as it does when the music is as chaotic as Nails is fucking amazing. And the fact that every, you know, twist of a song like Made to Make You Fail makes it feel like a larger song than it is kind of evidence of that. Like, it's unbelievably high in presence as a sound. And then, you know, the way Todd's vocal has gone more for that growl this time, and he's not just shouting. There are more vocal hooks per square inch on this album than there ever were before. Even in those tiny songs like Friend to All, they're super, super memorable.
You will not be forgiven. Like,
yeah, and across this album, you just get more songs feel like bangers than on any other, you know, more frequently than ever before. Violence and Forever is like a proper meaty song, right? And it's, you look at that and you want to shout that title before you've even heard the fucking hook, right? Like, you know you're going to be there to shout Violence is Forever. And I think that kind of is the hardcore song in the bunch, perhaps. Like, it's all two-step, but it's turned nuclear. The bass guitar on it sounds like it's bullying.
it's so
the double
beefy.
bass
Like,
is relentless.
just the beefiest bass tone of that. Just like, again, just a big chunky riff. Like, it's just such a hefty song, that.
I always think this is kind of like the crossover song. Like,
Yeah, hardcore crossover, yeah.
yeah, like maybe that's I'm making a difference out of nothing. But the thing that really stands out to me in this one is when it gets slower towards the end. There's been Slayer influence across the Nails catalogue, but those dueling leads, that is just Hanneman and King, and doing that to close things it's kind of like a wink from the band. It's like, well, you listen, if you're listening to this record, you know exactly what we're doing here. But it's something that everyone sensible likes. So go right ahead. Like, give us as much of that as you can. Like, in terms of like the halfway bangers or like the more fleshed out songs that Nails tend to put here, Violence is Forever is like just one of their catchiest songs.
I mean, the moment in it, the halfway moment with the stop into the thrash riff and the little snare roll kind of building is amazing. And then within, I don't know, however many seconds, you are on like a beatdown part that is wide open wound level, fucking violent and unbelievable, like car pile up. Just, there is absolutely the definite most open Slayer influence on this record in particular. Savage Intolerance, if you're going to put it down to one, is pretty much the Nails Does Slayer song, isn't it? And It fucking rules. That thrash pace, just mercilessly hammering at you, is amazing. And there is a riff in there that I had forgotten about. And the first time I put it on again for this, it made me like make a noise out loud to myself. And it's the proper full-on evil Slayer spider riff part. The do-do-do-do-do kind of up and down the fretboard.
Yeah, I like...
Overwhelmingly awesome. Almost too much to bear.
Like, I forget that, like, you have those kind of, like, up and down the fretboard, almost, like, slightly more technical riffs, and it's like...
Yeah.
From this album, which I think this is the steamroller, that you have those bits like that, and it just kind of shows, like, oh yeah, Nails can actually, like, they'll get those flourishes in there when they want to, you know, just get a little bit fancy, but just doing it in the evil Slayer way.
Well, Slayer is almost certainly the actual point of influence, but I was listening to it and I was like, this sounds like when Akakok could go fast. It's so like snaky and arcane, and it just kind of coils and constricts in such a violent and uncomfortable way. It's just not something that, like you say, on the more straightforward, muscular Nails record, it's such an odd move, but it fits so seamlessly. I didn't even notice until listening to it for this.
Yeah, and you were touching on the kind of Tom Araya-isms of like bits when a certain phrase will kind of land when you think about fucking necrophobic, whatever. The bit in Pain before the warring guitar solo comes in, when Todd just goes "time to die," is unbelievably awesome. Like that's up there with Bratabrand from Cavell Attack and any Midnight song for awesome shit to throw to a guitar solo with. And you don't immediately think of that with Nails, right? But that's in there. They had that.
Yeah.
How fucking brilliantly catchy is "Life Is a Death Sentence"?
It's mad. Like, for the things that we were referencing in the influences bit at the beginning, we were saying, like, Infest, crossed out, like, Japanese hardcore, whatever. I love all that stuff. But they haven't got hooks like Life Is a Death Sentence, where, again, every single moment is, like, cattle branded into my head forever.
Consumed with vengeance, life is a death sentence.
I mean, that song, it's an amazing throwback to begin with to those D-beat roots of the band, that main riff.
Yeah.
It's so rowdy and exciting. And then, oh yeah, one more thing this record is going to do, at least on par with the moments in Abandon All Life, if not better than ever, those slow triptych note bend moments as well, that derail second halves of songs. That one that happens 45 seconds into Life is a Death Sentence makes you want to be sick. It's so nasty. It's so pure. There's a bit on it when Todd just straight up vomit noises. Except, in this song, it's not like the dirge riff ending like it is with Some Queek or whatever. It's going to bring that chorus back over the new riff. And that's like one of the greatest riffs they've ever written. Just at the end, the life is a death sentence. And it makes you throw those punches even harder. The guitar just sounds so good and so satisfying in such a primal metal way. The breakdowns on this, because of that insane production job, just hit harder than ever before. Again, the last minute of Violence is Forever before it turns into that kind of squalling end of Raining Blood kind of nightmare thing. And then there's real stuff like that happens in the kind of little suite of songs almost that makes up the kind of back end of the record before the big closer. Stuff like Parasite and Into Quietus. With Into Quietus, the opening sounds like modern day Cannibal Corpse, that level of kind of when we review like new Eric Rutan produced Cannibal Corpse albums and we go like, how have you made it that heavy with that kind of blast and how bulky the tone is, it does that. But I fucking love how that last riff switch into the slow one at the end of Into Quietus, track 9, it almost acts as like a primer for the last song. For me, when I listen to this album, and obviously Nails albums are going by so fast, that riff arriving is almost like the, oh shit, we're arriving into the big finale now, you know, the post-mortem before the Raining Blood, if you will. It's just like, it's such a simple, nasty riff, slow-mo pushing you to the end. How long they precisely spend on like each bit on this album, where the turns of pace arrive, how long a riff will last for. It's not that the fat has been honed away, because obviously it's the longest album, and there was no fat. But it's like every single riff on here is just maximum meat. It's all meat, this album.
No, it is. Like, I mean, Into Quietus, again, like it's like where they bring the evil back into it, and I agree with that. Like that is a song that is like making way for the closer and kind of preparing you for it, as just like slowing things down a little bit, but not going full into the epic close territory. But it is just that great kind of like primer for for the monster you're about to encounter. I
mean, and when it arrives, like that thing we've been saying the whole time about the long closing power violence grind song. I can't think of many better outside of the likes of Jane Doe than They Come Crawling Back, which is almost like... I mean, the fact that Nails are back is obviously the ultimate outcome of all of this, but if they never came back, this feels like they're delivering on the promise that they made with each previous record, where it's like, you know that thing we did last time? Well, that, but more. And we've arrived at like the natural endpoint of that sort of thing.
Yeah, because this is the thing to finally push a Nails record over the 20-minute mark. They Come Crawling Back. The genuine case, like I think with the other ones, if you say it, it's kind of joking, but this is the genuine case of the Nails epic. Yeah. Like what kind of form that would take. And to me, it's such a natural extension of those like side closers on Abandon All Life. You know, let's just keep pushing at that, adding more parts into it. The sensation of unease and fear that you hear in those songs, particularly, like let's take that. You know, again, the weird feeling of sickness that you get in the intro of Wide Open Wound. Let's turn that into an extended, protracted kind of marathon, oozing with malice, and make it this kind of death crawl. It's a really interesting song in structure. Because, weirdly, I'm going to throw back to the song Traitor here, and what we spoke about, which is like a little 28-second one from Unsilent Death. But I was saying about that is like 6 parts, right? It's linear fashion. Yet, it completely works. They Come Crawling Back. It has a verse and a chorus that it does return to in the middle section of the song. But on a macro level, the full 8 minutes, it becomes like this like Lovecraftian monster of a song, like kind of stitched out of these like disgusting parts. It is a very strangely structured song, but it is so natural to the ear, even though one of the parts they wrote isn't even their original part. Because despite this metal flavour of the album being more prominent than it was ever before, there are still those nods to kind of the hardcore bands of, you know, particularly Todd's youth in the, you know, Friend to All borrows its title from a Necros song of the same name. They Come Crawling Back. The outro riff is the song Dirge from the almost ungoogleable, like, lost hardcore band Dead Black, which is the old band, weirdly, of Justin DeTore, who now plays in Summerlands and Dream Unending, but it's like his old 2000s hardcore band, and there's like one fucking demo or whatever, which has that that whole weird, queasy, slightly woozy outro. And, you know, Todd has said that he is, like, his favourite underground guitarist, and they just basically borrowed that riff and used it for the outro of They Come Crawling Back. But how this song moves on a macro level, moving from one part into the other, you would never know things like that. And I suppose, again, going through it in linear fashion, the intro, to me, I mentioned that's like black metal flavour on parts before. This, to me, is where like you really hear that, like, Leviathan, almost like tremolo going on, which is a really alien element in the mix for Nails, but it raises the hair on the back of your neck. You know, it's almost like a great horror score or something. It genuinely conveys, you know, chilling, skin crawling.
It's got a sense of grandeur that Nails, even on, again, the previous epic closers, hasn't been there, but in a way that, you're right, it is unsettling and it is like chilling, but it's just on a scale that feels far bigger than anything that's come before it.
It's got this kind of wailing quality. It's almost mournful, but it never feels like Nails have shown any even like glimmer of weakness. Like, it feels more like, I don't know, the sound of Nails as enemies or something, like, than it is the band themselves. It's got this kind of like desperate clawing quality, but it also doesn't feel like, again, the band have shown any sort of like repose at all. It's just mental, this song. Like, I don't know how they've accomplished that.
Yeah, it's almost grand by Nail stands when it kicks in, you know, the way they summon that thing up from the depths with the feedback, and the double bass part that lays in on when the Doom riff is happening is fucking proper, like, horror show stuff. And then, Jesus fuck Christ, the main verse riff is appallingly violent, which is a riff they apparently had since about 2010, but they didn't put it on Abandon All Life because Wide Open Wound was a song they wrote that was like sort of similar in feel to that. But again, it's one of those cases where every piece that they had for this song, whether it was something they wrote in 2010, whether it's something their friend wrote in 2007, it's like it's waited in slumber for the absolute opportune time to be slotted together in this perfect way. It feels so counterintuitive, but becoming this like 8-minute Frankenstein's abomination with all these other riffs stitched onto it kind of makes everyone in sequence better. The double time version of that main riff in the second verse, fucking unbelievable. Todd just sounds so gnarly on that hook. You know, they come crawling back like he got a mouthful of blood. It's hardcore in spirit, but the song is so like slimy and slithering. He's talking about some like eldritch tentacles or something. And then the breakdown, again, what they learned from Wide Open Wound, when the song is already in that kind of tempo, how do you make the breakdown distinct and hit it in its own right? Make it sound like the car crash in Death Proof. Just horrifying. Picks scraping like buckling metal skeletons, bones snapping, fucking staggering. And then, like I said, that outro, which almost has this kind of woozy quality to it, just sort of lumbering, unsettling into the finish line. Even it fades out at the end, doesn't it? Like you would think a Nails record sort of fading out on a riff would be a weird idea, but man,
it's how they can draw that for like almost like half length of the song is just like that last riff kind of like developing and growing and eventually just fading away. It's so, those little changes they make just keep that riff really hypnotic, but again just like terrifying in its scope and scale.
It's kind of the most exciting thing any closing track can be, because on one hand it delivers on all the promises of the previous closing tracks, but at the same time, for a while, we thought this might be the final, like, long-form thing Nails ever did. There was this feeling of, what else could they do? What else were they capable of? Like, they kind of, had the scorched earth thing, proved that they were the best at the violent, muscular power violence. But this is a completely different kind of song. And yet they were doing it to a standard of basically anyone else who was doing this at the time.
Yeah, and I was thinking about this record being, the perfectly evolved killer, the perfect fusion of hardcore and metal. It leans more into the metal than they ever had before, but the hardcore is still an essential element without which you do not get these performances and these songs. Watching live footage it's really fun how these songs live can almost start to feel like really chaotic grind songs again, like it's fucking From Enslavement to Obliteration or something. But here, recorded in this way, there's something kind of state of the art about them. And all of the interviews that they do, particularly around this album, Abandon All Life, talking about the kind of creative process, they seem so perfectionist about it. They are so driven to make these, like, sleek as can be, explosion records. They are intent on them not being half an hour long or longer, because that's too much, and you might have the effect worn off by the 25th minute. And they take 3 years between records, and obviously we've got a fucking 8-year gap now, but different circumstances, but 15-minute records as a sort of average, right? 20 minutes. They don't shit that out. They don't go, we need to write 50 minutes of just rowdy cross songs we can call an album. There's a level of quality control on like every single riff transition, every moment, that is pretty insane here. And the 20 minutes that you are going to get on a lengthy Nails record like this one have been like poured over and edited ruthlessly.
I mean, it's what you said. This is what separates Nails apart from any other grind and power violence band who are just, going to drop an album that is just a bunch of it's like 50 minutes of just like really like cool chaotic blasts of noise. But Nails have that care and attention to detail poured over every aspect of it without it feeling overworked or overdone in any way. It still has a spontaneity, like when it needs to. It's still exciting, but there is just like a just meticulous craft to these songs that genuinely makes them like actual classics.
Yeah, like Nails' reputation is for just like this crazy, mad, rip your face off violence, but I think it's about time. I think it's about time they really got recognised for the attention to detail and the quality control.
Yeah, it's not something I gave them credit for until I started preparing for this, because I always like look back on the history of this style, and I always think Pig Destroyer are the band that, like, there were amazing records and classic bands before, but they kind of took it from being an experiment and really proved that it could be an art form where there was like a serious emotional range and one of the greatest lyric writers and that sort of. So they always got that kind of credit. And Nails for me was like, they're the nastiest, hardest, like fucking most bullish band there is. And it was kind of only going back and doing this. A catalogue I've heard dozens of times. And you go, oh no, they're like sculptors.
Yeah. I think that they're the hardest band because they're the most honed band, right? It's not the most chaotic. It's the most like fucking laser precision, bullet honed. Nothing that doesn't need to be there is in there. Every single riff, every single moment hits and counts. And I think you and every one of us with this particular, sonic concoction that they cooked up together with Kurt Ballou, like, I know doing the Rain in Blood comparison is for any record is a bit like, oh, it's the scariest movie since The Exorcist. It kind of sets it up for a bit of failure. But if our generation has anything comparable to a Rain in Blood type moment, that perfectly tuned for violence, completely shaved of any moments that don't hit, I feel it probably is these Nails albums. And Abandon All Life has got the fiery intensity, but the way Rain in Blood, again, something that it maybe doesn't get as much recognition for as it really deserves, compositionally and sonically, so advanced, not just pure speed, so advanced and detailed. You Will Never Be One of Us is one of the few records to come since to actually have that similar kind of compact precision genius to it.
Yeah, it's kind of like you say, those Exorcist comparisons, they're exhausting. And then when Hereditary came out, you went and saw it and went, okay, it's not the same thing, but I understand why you're saying it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a similar thing.
Yeah, and it's great because obviously there is a really big Slayer influence on this record, but what we're really saying isn't like, oh, they've made a great crossover thrash record like a lot of the popular ones that have come since this record in more recent years. It's not even a sonic line as much as it is that ethos, right? It's that spirit to strive to achieve that and the sophistication that's been built up in their approach over these 3 albums working together to be a little bit less naive in realising it. And it fucking recaptures the excitement of hearing like heavy fast music on a second basis about as perfectly as anything this decade. Yeah. Best song on You Will Never Be One of Us. There are so many highlights on this thing. I have such a thing for They Come Crawling Back, which I think is just outstanding as a overall composition, but ultimately I think the title track is the best song that Nails have ever written. It is such a compact tactical strike of like hard music excellency. The way they smack you with that intro, rage, and then dispense of it before you know it, and then just let the song lay into the best riff of Todd Jones's career. I think if you were showing someone, hey, here's what Nails are, I think you're showing that one.
Yeah, it's the title track. I mean, They Come Crawling Back, as we said, is this incredible closing statement, but for just perfecting what Nails essentially are, you can't get better than that title track. It is again, that opening blast is kind of almost overlooked in how good it is once you get past the intro, because it's all just the prelude to that riff hitting. But if you don't get that chaos of that initial blast, that shift into that riff doesn't unlock in the way it does in Magic. But just title track is just so good.
Yeah, the music video with the 3 of them just playing in a practice room and the camera is spinning around them as that last riff plays.
Head banging on that riff.
Yeah, that's the Nails image to me. It's just them losing their shit, guided by the power of the riff. Elliot, are you chiming in here as well, or are you going somewhere else?
Yeah, no, it's the same as you guys. For me, I was looking at it was between the bookends as well, and I very nearly went from They Come Crawling Back because I do think it's so terrifying and so impressive. But the title track is one of the most vicious songs of the 21st century and one of the catchiest. And it's so Nails. It doesn't feel remotely like a single at all, and yet it's so unbelievably catchy. It kind of forces itself into being a classic just through sheer tyranny of will. It's insane.
Yeah, this record, I think it's again, maybe this record is best remembered by the metal side of the fan base. Maybe the punks are most likely to still hold close to Unsilent Death or Abandon All Life, but critical acclaim is achieved, and the perfect 3-album curve is essentially fulfilled, and history is stamped on those 3 records. But what follows